What's up, you guys? It's Tyler from the Herrintons, and we're back today with a brand new video. And today we're talking all about the Sony A6300. Now, if you know anything about me, you know that I've been a Canon lover and shooter for the last 5 or 6 years, but recently I picked up the Sony A6300 to use as a gimbal camera. So when I first got this camera, I didn't know anything about Sony. I had never used a Sony camera before for anything professional, so I really needed to learn how to set this camera up well to shoot weddings. So I had to scour the internet for videos and blogs and all sorts of random stuff, and I finally kind of came up with all the different tweaks and settings and changes that I felt like I needed to make for this specific camera to get it ready for me to shoot weddings with it. Now, if you have an A6500, I would imagine the menu systems are the exact same. I don't have one, so I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that a lot of these things are going to apply between the A6500 and the A6300 with a few little changes in the A6500. All right, so let's just jump into it. Let's go and look at all the different changes I made to this camera to get it ready to shoot video. If you just picked up a 6300, this should be really helpful to you and hopefully will save you a lot of time. And if you're considering getting one, hopefully this will kind of give you a little insight into the menu system and some of the different things you're gonna have to do to make it viable to shoot weddings with. So let's just jump into it and let's look into the menus. Alright, so here's the Sony A6300, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna show you kind of the first 5 things I think you need to change that are kind of beyond the obvious. Beyond, like, obviously, like shutter speed and kind of like all the basic stuff. I'm just gonna talk about some things that are really specific to this camera that I think make a really big deal. So the first one is, as you can see here, this is the record button, and it's actually pretty terrible. It's really small. It's inset in this. It's just really hard to press, and you don't get a whole lot of like tactile response when you do press it. So the first thing I do is I actually have it set so this button right here is my movie record button. I just think it's a lot easier to press when you're holding it. I just think it makes a lot more sense. So the way you set that up is you go into menu, you're gonna go to the gear and then to menu number 7, and then you go right here to custom key shoot. You're gonna arrow over to the second menu, and then you are going to go right here where it says AF/MF button, and you want to set it to movie. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it so as long as this switch is in the up position, you can see that this switch goes up and down. As long as this switch is in the up position, this is going to activate movie recording. When you hit it, you'll start rolling. I think that's really, really important, and that has made a huge difference for me when I'm using this camera. So the next thing that you're going to do to set up your A6300 is you want to set up all of your custom buttons and physical functions on the camera. So the things you have the ability to customize are the C1 button right here next to the shutter right here. You have the each of these different directions on the, so if you hit up, hit left, hit down, hit right, these can all be set to something custom, and you have your C2 button right here. Now the way you change all these is if you go to menu, same thing, we're in the gear number 7 again. We're going to come down to custom key shoot where we were before, except we're going to stay on the first one, and you can see right here custom button 1, custom button 2, center button, all these different things. So you can customize this to whatever you want. So I have mine set up, so custom button 1, this one up here, I have it set to zoom, which is clear image zoom, so you can zoom in and basically magnify the lens that you're using. Custom button 2, I have mine set to white balance. The center button I have set to focus magnifier, so I can punch in and see if my focus is correct. The left button here will give me my focus area, so I can change where my focus point is on the screen. Top I leave set to display because if you can leave it set to what it says, I would do that because it's easier to remember because it tells you right there. Right I have set to ISO. Down I have set to turn the switch between the monitor and the viewfinder. If it's really sunny out and you don't want the screen to be on, it'll save battery life to just turn it off, and it'll just be sending the information to the viewfinder. And then yeah, so that's what I have all those buttons set to. Alright, so the next thing we want to set up is going to be our autofocus. The A6300 is known for having really great autofocus, but there's a few little settings you might want to get just right in order to have the best autofocus experience possible. So I'm referring this mostly for use on a gimbal, which is what I use this camera for, with this 16mm pancake lens. So these are the settings that I use when I'm doing that. So you want to go to menu, the little camera icon, submenu 3, and then right here for focus mode, we're going to choose continuous autofocus, which is the only one in video mode, you have two options. You have continuous autofocus, which means that autofocus is on essentially, or you have manual focus. Those are kind of like your two options when you're in video mode. So continuous autofocus, so it means it'll always be searching for autofocus. And then the focus area I use most of the time is wide, which means that the entire sensor is being used, like all the focus points. Or if it's a situation where I want to be a little more specific and I want to take a little more control, I'll switch into zone, and I'll switch my zone to sort of just like this top quadrant in the middle here. And basically it just means it'll only focus on things that are in this area. And I choose this area specifically because this is the area where most of the time the bride and groom's heads are going to be, or whoever my subject is going to be. So I'll use that sometimes. Other than that, I've been pretty happy with wide. The next thing you want to do for autofocus is you want to come over to number 6 here, and you have a few different options down here. So the first one is center lock on autofocus. I trim that off. I just don't want it to be locking onto anything, especially on the gimbal. I don't want it to get confused and start locking onto stuff. And then the second thing is the smile and face detect. So basically the camera will find faces and prioritize focusing on those, which if you only have a few faces in your subject or in your scene is really great. Like I really suggest leaving this on for most things, because if you can see your client's face in your shot, it will lock on focus. It's very, very good. The only time it gets a little bit confused is if you're on a dance floor or something like that where there's a lot of faces and like a lot of things going on. It can get distracted and confused with that many like faces and things to detect. So in that circumstance, I would turn it off. But for the most part, leaving this on is really helpful. For dial/wheel setup, this is important as well. If you're coming from a different type of camera system, it might be backwards. So for me, for Canon, I'm used to this back wheel here being my aperture and this top wheel being my shutter speed. But when I got it out of the box, it was actually switched. So this was controlling shutter speed and this was controlling aperture, which was really confusing for me. So I had to go in here and switch those. So if you get it and that's freaking you out, this right here is how you switch that. All right, so the next thing that I changed that makes a huge difference and helps make sure you get really great footage is zebras. So basically what zebras do, if you click on zebra here, is giving you all these different values. And essentially what it's gonna do is it's gonna put some white lines that are diagonal on your screen that look like zebra stripes in areas where the pixels in that area have reached this level of brightness. So basically there's a scale. 0 would be pure black, 100 would be pure white, and then obviously there's like every step of grayscale in between. So basically it's going to start showing you once these pixels reach the 85 percentile, the 90 percentile, 95, 100, etc. So I have mine set to 100 plus. And the reason I do that is because I really only want to know when I'm peaking and I'm losing information. So to me, if I see a zebra on my screen, 9 times out of 10, I know that that's bad, especially if it's on something important like the dress or somebody's face or like anything like that that I actually really need. This means to me that there's no information there and you need to adjust your exposure or you're going to have a bad looking shot. So I leave mine set to 100 plus and I leave it on all the time because it's like a safety net for me to know if I see zebras, I need to make a change. So something that's really important to know where it is, because it's kind of in a weird spot, is going to be gamma display assist. So essentially what this does is it allows you to turn this on, and I usually would just leave it set to auto. This is only going to apply to you if you shoot in S-Log2 or S-Log3. But if you know anything about S-Log, you know that it's a very, very, very flat looking image, almost looks grayscale. Like it's very, very flat, which is great for color grading and things like that because it gives you a lot of room to work in post, but it's really hard to look at on the back of a screen and it's really hard to get focus and things like that. So by turning on gamma display assist, what it essentially does is applies a LUT within the camera. So what you're seeing on the monitor is an image that has contrast, that has saturation, that looks really good, but what's recording to the actual memory card is going to be that really flat log footage. So gamma display assist is kind of hidden. It's all the way over here in the toolbox, which I don't think makes a whole lot of sense, but it's in this toolbox under gamma display assist. And if you're shooting an S-Log, you definitely want to make sure you have this on. So it makes it just that much easier to grab focus, grab exposure, and just make sure that what you're getting is going to look good once you get it into the computer. And of course, I can't talk about settings on the A6300 without talking about my picture profile. That's kind of like the #1 question that everybody asks, anybody who uses a Sony camera. So picture profile is under the camera icon #5, and right here at the bottom, picture profile, I use picture profile 3. And if you arrow to the right, hit that right little off the jog wheel here, it'll give you the advanced settings for all the different profiles, and you can actually tweak these to your liking. So if you ever need to make some slight changes and you want to make tweaks and things like that, this is what people talk about. You can make a ton of different changes within this, and they all have like a different effect. So I don't even know exactly what all of these different things do, but the way I have mine set is I have my gamma set to ITU 709, and I have my color mode set to Pro. And I think that I tweaked one of these. I don't honestly remember what the default is, but this is what I use, and this is what I'm using specifically when I am trying to match my Canon cameras. Now, if I'm just shooting this camera on its own for just a project with just this camera, I like to shoot S-Log3 sometimes, things like that. But if I'm shooting this to be paired with my Canon DSLR footage and my Canon C100, these are the settings that I use, and it really helps me make sure I can match all my cameras. So we talked a little bit earlier about clear image zoom and how I have clear image zoom set to #1 on my custom function buttons. But by default, when you will roll the camera out of the box, clear image zoom will be actually turned off. So to turn it back on, you need to go to the gear icon, #3, come all the way down to the bottom here for zoom setting, and you need to make sure that clear image zoom is turned on. And again, what that'll let you do is take a 50mm lens and you can double it. So it'll essentially, you can go anywhere from 50 all the way up to 100mm without losing any considerable quality. So it's a really cool way to make your lenses a little bit more versatile, get a little bit more reach when you need it, and it's a really cool feature that is only in Sony cameras. So make sure you turn that on and that you're utilizing it, because it is a really cool feature. One thing I just wanted to note really quick, I know a lot of people bought this combo of the 16mm lens with the 6300, which I think is a great affordable option for the gimbal, but I just wanted to mention one thing, that if you do come to this menu here, which is the camera icon #4, you will see here it says autofocus drive speed, autofocus track sensitivity. Those two things are going to be grayed out with this lens specifically. So basically, if you have a lot of other Sony lenses, nicer ones, you can adjust the drive speed, and the track sensitivity of how the lens will focus in autofocus, how it performs, things like that. With this lens, just because it's so cheap and I think there's not a whole lot of going on inside of it, you don't have those options. So if you see these are grayed out with this lens, don't worry, it's not a problem, and I still get great autofocus response and great autofocus everything with this lens. I don't think that these matter, but I have had a few people ask me about it. So just so you know, if you do see these grayed out, totally fine. If you have, again, a more expensive Sony lens, you will be able to adjust these, and I think that they are worth playing around with and figuring out what works best for that lens. But with the 16mm lens that I have, it's not an option. Okay, so one thing that's kind of weird about this camera is when you're in 4K, and you're here in the briefcase #1, you'll see that monitor brightness is actually grayed out. So basically what it does is the camera automatically dims the screen pretty significantly when you're in 4K. I think this is because it already struggles with overheating, and I think by dimming the monitor and kind of forcing you to use the dimmer monitor, it's helping with the overheating issues. The only problem is that it does make it a little bit harder to see outside. So I can show you if I switch the camera here into 60p, and I go back into the same system, you can see now that these options are available. So in monitor brightness, what I suggest you do is set it to sunny weather. So the two options you have would be for manual, which you can see is significantly darker, and you can push it down or kind of push it up. You have some control over it here, obviously in manual, but in sunny weather, it's basically just making it as bright as possible, and it makes it optimized to see outside. So if you're shooting weddings and things like that, and you're going to be outside a lot, I really suggest that you set this to sunny weather if you're going to be shooting in 1080p. Otherwise, like I said, in 4K, you don't have the option, and you just have to deal with the dimmer screen. All right, there you guys go. I hope you found this super helpful. This is going to be the outro. We don't have a face outro today. I've already changed my whole setup around, but I hope you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions at all, please leave a comment down below. I'd be glad to help you with any other questions that you might have. If you found this video helpful, please go ahead and subscribe. I really appreciate all the different subscribers we have out there. And yeah, this has been Todd from the Herritons, and we'll see you in the next one.